All right. Good morning and welcome everybody to the Santa Cruz Libraries Facilities Financing Authority Joint Powers Board meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Tina Friend,
Here.
Carlos Palacios,
Here.
Vice Chair Martin Bernal,
Here.
Chair Jamie Goldstein.
Here. All right. That takes us to the second item on the agenda, which is additional materials. Do we have any additional materials on today's agenda?
We have no additional materials today.
Okay. Any changes to today's agenda?
There are no changes to today's agenda.
Okay. So that takes us to oral communication. Oral communication is an opportunity for members of the public to address this board on any item that's not on today's agenda, but within the subject. Is there any public comment, Madam Moderator?
Chair Goldstein, at this time, no public comment has been timely submitted via email.
Okay. I will close public comment and take us to item 5, Executive Director Report. Director Nimitz.
Thank you, Chair Goldstein. I have submitted my report in writing. I'll do a brief update. The Aptos Library project is moving forward. We have a selection team meeting weekly. We're narrowing the focus of this design build project. We've got 3 firms that are in an interview process, and I expect a recommendation will go to the county board within the next month. Boulder Creek is closed, had been bid out, and we made the decision to rebid the Boulder Creek project. We expect that we will do that late this summer. So there'll be a slight delay in that project. Branciforte and Garfield Park are undergoing the development of construction documents and should start their permitting process. Capitola, great news, we're moving forward. We've got some solutions around the power line issues. We're hoping to open Capitola in late fall of this fiscal year. Downtown, the Downtown Library project has undergone a study with Group 4 to look at the multi-use scenario, and Group 4 will be presenting that to the subcommittee. It is open to the public to listen in today at 4:30 p.m. La Selva Beach is still under construction. All of our projects have been deemed essential public works projects, but some of the subcontractors have found it difficult to go and work on the project. So we're slightly behind on La Selva Beach. And I think that's my summary.
Okay. Thank you for that update, Susan. Takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is updates and comments by board members. Does any board member have an update or a comment? Seeing none, that'll take us to consent calendar. We have 1 item on consent. Does anyone on the board wish to pull the item off consent? Sarah, moderator, is there anybody from the public who wants to pull an item from consent?
Chair Goldstein, I do not have any public comments at this time on that agenda item.
Okay. With that, do we have a motion on consent?
So moved. I move the consent agenda.
I'll second. This is Tina Friend from Scotts Valley.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein.
Yes. Okay, so that motion carries unanimously. That takes us to general business. We have 2 items on general business today, and the first is our budget for the LFFA for fiscal year 2021. Do we have a staff report, please?
Edith presented this budget last month. Edith, I don't know if you have any additional comments.
No, I don't. The written document that I have submitted, as Susan mentioned, is similar to, or is exactly the same as what was submitted last time. Are you able to hear me?
Okay. So with that, are there any questions on the LFFA budget as submitted? Seeing none, Moderator Jones, do we have any public comment?
None at this time.
Okay. Bring it back to the board for discussion and motion.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second this is Carlos.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the LFFA budget for fiscal year 2021. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Aye.
Jamie Goldstein.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so that takes us to the next item on general business, which is our third quarter financial statements for the LFFA bond activity and balances. And the recommended action is to accept and file the third quarter statement on bond activity and balances. Is there any staff report on this item?
This is Edith Driscoll, your treasurer. Again, the item is as presented. We will be doing one of these every quarter as we have done in the past. I do want to comment that this is strictly from the first bond issue. The second bond issue has now been received, and I know Capitola has been the first to draw down on that new money. And in the future, you'll receive two separate statements. I do want to emphasize that we need to materially conversations about getting their claim in. Again, we need to materially get the claim in, excluding interest, by June, 3 years from when it was issued. So I believe that was about June 15th. That's the end of my report.
Great, thank you, Edith. Are there any questions from board members? Seeing none, Moderator Jones, do we have any public comment?
I have none at this time.
Okay, with that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for a motion or further discussion.
Jamie, I just wanted to say that I successfully bought library bonds yesterday, and it was very exciting. So the Santa Cruz Public Library bonds are up and available for sale.
Wow,
I've never done that before.
I've never done that either. Congratulations, that's really
Thank
neat.
you.
I might have to look and see how to do that. Might be time to take some money out of the stock market. Not providing anybody financial advice, but regardless. All right, so is there any further discussion on this item? Any motion?
I'll move to accept and file the attached financial statement as of March 31, 2020.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Aye.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Chair Goldstein.
Yes. Okay, so with that, this LFFA meeting is adjourned until our next scheduled meeting, which is planned to be at Aptos on June 4th at 6 p.m. Obviously, that's pending the current health orders at that time, whether it'll be in person or online. And so our LFFA meeting is adjourned. That takes us then to the Santa Cruz County Libraries Joint Powers Authority Board meeting. Of
And if Chair Goldstein, if we could just stand by for just a moment.
course.
For public attendees who are on this call, I would just like to welcome everyone to the Library Joint Powers Authority Board meeting. We have adjourned the LFFA meeting. Chair Goldstein, if you're ready, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. All right, welcome everybody to the Libraries Joint Powers Board meeting. Can we have I'll call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Tina Friend,
Here.
Carlos Palacios,
Here.
Martin Bernal,
Here.
Jamie Goldstein.
Here. All right, do we have any additional materials on today's agenda? Have we received any?
We do not.
Okay, any changes up to today's agenda?
We have no changes to today's agenda.
Okay, so that takes us to oral communication. Is there any member from the public who would wish to address the board on any item that's not on today's agenda, but is within the board's authority? Do we have any public comment, Moderator Jones?
Chair Goldstein, we have no comment at this time.
Okay, that takes us to item 5, which is report by library director. Director Nimitz, do you have anything to add to the report?
I wrote a rather lengthy report about what the library's been doing during this closure period, and I'd like to just go through some of the highlights. We closed, like other entities, upon the shelter-in-place order on March 15th. We created a period of 0 overdue fines during the shelter-in-place order. We have developed virtual library cards that people can get online. We've been promoting our virtual library. We have magazines, audiobooks, ebooks, news, movies, music 24/7 from people's home with a library card. We've worked with all of our vendors to try and make our licensing agreements work from people's homes outside the library walls. We've directed all our materials budget towards online resources. We've worked with the Friends of the Library to raise money for online resources, and we're curating national and regional collections. We've completely redone our website. We're offering reference via phone, chat, and email. We've provided staff to the 211 response team. We're providing free Wi-Fi outside all of our buildings for public use. We're providing internet accessible laptops to shelters. We've done a ton of programming for adults and children, particularly trying to work closely with the school districts. We've created a digital concierge service for school teachers in our area to help them find appropriate digital resources as they move to online teaching. Facilities projects continue. We've been assigning our regular staff work from home. Some of our staff are doing disaster worker status. I know there's been several people that have been working on West Cliff sort of as a ranger working with the public. We had to end the service of 62 temporary staff employees on April 10th. And then we've been really working hard on the budget and the plan for reopening, which we will talk about later today. It's been a busy time.
Great. Are there any questions from board members on the director's report? Seeing none, any public comment on this item, Moderator Jones?
There's no public comment at this time.
I'm assuming that means no comment.
Yes,
So
there's no public
that-
comment at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. With that, I will take us to the report by the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Do we have a member from the Friends here this morning?
We
Yes,
have
Martha-
Bob White.
And Bob would like to present as a panelist, so hold on just a moment.
Is Bob not with the Library Advisory Commission? Is he both?
Oh, I'm sorry, you said Friends of the Library. I apologize. That's Marcia Greenspan.
Great,
Hello.
thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great, great. Well, thank you. It's nice to be here today, and I'm certainly looking forward to connecting in person as soon as possible. So a quick update, Friends book sale operations came to a halt mid-March with shelter in place. Our board, staff, and chapter officers agreed to redirect our efforts toward support of the public library's virtual collections. We coordinated an email campaign to rally support from the community and to raise money to expand collections. We raised a little more than $16,000 during the month of April. This total includes substantial gifts directly from a Friends chapter. So it was a really lovely collaborative effort, a sort of silver lining to our, our restrictions during this time. We received donations from about 150 people in total, including 70 brand new donors. And Friends board members have coordinated efforts to reach out over the phone to each and every donor over the past week. So we're taking this opportunity to build relationships and find some strength together. Chapter volunteers are eager to get back to their work in person, but like I said, we're finding some ways to find meaningful connection in support of the library during shelter in place. We've also been focusing much of our efforts on our infrastructure of the organization. We have a newly formed and very active policies and procedures committee. We're clarifying and streamlining our board operations. I've been working weekly with our bookkeeper to improve our financial system. So we're really hunkering down on infrastructure. I have to say this has been a very strange first 8 weeks on the job for me. I'm brand new and I haven't had the opportunity to meet many of my coworkers yet, but somehow it has been I feel it's been extremely productive and so far a very positive experience, and I'm excited to be in this new role. And we're very eager to support the library and the community during this time.
All right. Thank you for that presentation and introduction. I look forward to meeting you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Are there any questions by board members? Seeing none, is there any public comment, Moderator Jones?
Chair Goldstein, there are no comments at this time.
Okay. So that then takes us to the report by the LAC. And I think that's for Commissioner Bob White.
Commissioner White, you are on the line. Your video is on and you are unmuted.
Good morning. So I'm Bob White. I'm chair of the Library Advisory Commission, and I have a brief report to share with you this morning. The April meeting of the Library Advisory Commission was canceled, and the next LAC meeting is scheduled for May 18th. It will be conducted via Zoom. Just to bring you up to date, as far as the membership, we have 4 new members on the LAC in 2020. And they are Rena Dubin from the city of Santa Cruz, Mary Ripma from the city of Santa Cruz, Tricia Wynn from Supervisors District 2, and Bruce Cotter from Supervisors District 5. So we have 4 new members this year. I'd also like to recognize those former LAC members whose terms have expired and thank them for their service to the LAC and the Santa Cruz Public Library system. And they are Martha Dexter from the city of Santa Cruz, Deb Tracy Prue from the city of Santa Cruz, Cindy Jackson from Supervisor District 2, and Nancy Gerd from Supervisor District 5. So again, our thanks to them for their contributions and service to the Santa Cruz County Library System. This year, the Library Advisory Commission will be working closely and helping to advise the Director of Libraries on overall priorities, budget issues, and staffing of library services during this difficult time period. We will also be working closely in helping to advise the Director of Libraries regarding the provision of library services and programs to serve the ongoing information needs and information resources for the Santa Cruz County Library community. I'd also like to personally commend Susan Nimitz Eric Howard, and the staff of the Santa Cruz Public Library System for the way they have served the needs of the community during this time period by providing increased access to online resources, virtual library access, reference and information services, and children and adult programming. I think they've done a fantastic job. And that concludes my report. If you have any, we be glad to try to answer those questions.
Of course. Are there any questions for Commissioner White? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Goldstein, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. It takes us to the next item on the agenda. Comments by board members. Any board members have any comments for us this morning? Okay, seeing none, that'll take us to consent. Consent calendar. Looks like we have 8 items on consent. All the items will be considered in a single vote unless a board member wants to pull any of the items or any of the items pulled by board members. Seeing none, from the moderator, does anyone from the public want to pull an item for discussion from consent?
Item from consent.
Okay, do we have a motion on consent?
Move to approve
I'll
the
move
consent.
approval.
I heard
I'll
two
move
motions.
approval. I'll move approval.
All right, Helga, do you have the motion down?
Tina moves approval, and who was second, please?
I'll second. Martin.
Martine. Okay, thank you. I got it. So roll call motion, Tina Friend,
Approval. Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein.
Aye. All right, the motion carries by unanimous vote. Okay, so that takes us to our general business for today, which is the 2020 work plan proposal and opening plan. Susan, do we have a staff presentation?
Eric Howard will be presenting.
Oh, great. All right.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. These are definitely unusual times. We started working on this work plan prior to the health crisis. And when we reflected on it, we recognized that many of the needs that we were trying to address in that original work plan are needs that we were fast and very quickly trying to address right now, but doing it inside this new environment and with to develop and evolve through our virtual library. There are some exceptions, and what we've attempted to do here is highlight those changes that we've made to this work plan since we started working on it. And the first priority that we have and what will eat up most of our time, we believe, over the next year, which is the restructuring of the organization and the reopening of it. Susan, just to take a step back, she identified when the virus was still just being reported about in China, our national association's fact sheets on how public libraries should respond during a pandemic. And so we quickly started to look at that and make the necessary changes to the organization to respond. And we put those in place. We started to put those in place prior to our closures. And now we're looking at how we can reopen with those guidelines and the guidelines from the governor and the health officer. At this stage, we have, and so let me just move through that piece. So I'm going to circle back to the phases that we have outlined and how we're going to try to go about that. But that is going to take up most of our time. And as we do that, we are going to continue to support these other objectives that we have in the work plan. That we have listed here, from learning, digital inclusion, the transformative spaces will continue, and the user experience. all of this is going to have new relevancy as we move forward. And I'll say the one other exception that we are seeking approval for is because this is such a dynamic situation, and we are focused on getting services up and running more and more and adapting them to these changes that are going on. We are asking that we hold off on putting together the strategic plan, and we delay that for another year. We want to have a better sense of where everyone is headed and what those needs will be, so that we can address them with our organization. So those are the two big changes that we're making to the work plan. Then I'm also happy to work through, walk you through a little bit around the opening plan, but maybe I should pause there to see if you have any questions regarding 1 through 6 of our work plan.
Are there any questions for Eric this morning on the first chunk of the work plan? Seeing none, why don't we keep going?
Great, thanks. So last night we sent out an email to staff with kind of a more detailed picture of what the very first stage of this change is going to be regarding the month of May. And we're calling this phase 1, stage 1. And it's the only piece of the plan that actually has dates connected to it. And it seems at this stage to make, we can conceptualize how this is going to go through phases. And I think it's probably appropriate to look and start exploring criteria around what would connect with those other 2 phases that will happen later on, rather than putting dates on it. And we know that the governor is using criteria too with different phases. And so we hope to have conversations with the health department and kind of gauge how we can match up that criteria regarding things like, are there less cases? Where are we with contact tracing, et cetera, to match that up with the 2 other phases that we have envisioned here. So the first phase that takes us through May, and this is actually phase 1, stage 1. There's a couple stages in phase 1. Beginning next week, we intend to call about 1,300 customers. And these are the customers who were waiting to pick up their books just prior to us closing. So we have approximately 1,300 customers still waiting for those items, and we want to make sure that they're served first, since they've been waiting the longest for the books that they had made requests for. And some of them may have found alternative options, including our ebooks, and we know many have. Our ebook usage is up 80% since we closed the physical libraries. And so we've also, as a side note, been shifting our budget to accommodate those needs. And as you heard, the Friends of the Library have helped us out significantly with that. So we're going to call through all 1,300 of those customers. Also take it as an opportunity to talk about what we're sharing with you right now about some of these other services that we have. And then we'll walk them through what the process is going to look like when they come in to pick up their book. And so the first piece of this envisions us having 3 main libraries open to provide this service. So it's going to be Aptos, Scotts Valley, and the Downtown Library. And then over the next 2 weeks following those calls, we will then address all the other branches and move their items that those customers were waiting for over to those 3 branches. And so we'll clear out, there's approximately of those 1,300 customers, we have approximately 2,000 items waiting for them. And we hope to clear out those 2,000 items. And we'll learn some lessons from this experience so that by June, we'll announce where we will expand the curbside service and to which branches. And we'll take those lessons learned and apply them to other branches. And that's when all customers who are seeking requests of our print materials will be able to pick them up. So we're going to clear those holds first, and then we're going to move in the month of June to responding to new requests. The reason why we are taking this in steps like this is because unlike retail and most other businesses, the library relies on loaning items. And so we've been following the CDC guidelines on safely handling those materials. And we've put together a good plan that we'll be sharing with the health department around how we're going to transfer safely those items when they come in, how our staff handles it, and then how they get loaned out again. In a nutshell, in addition to a number of pieces, which I won't go into right now, to safely handle those materials, but they will be quarantined for at least 72 hours, which is based on the CDC guidelines around how long the virus potentially can remain active on materials. We know that a large number of our patrons are vulnerable, they're seniors, and we want to do this and we want to respond to the needs of the community, but we have to do it carefully and cautiously, and we're going to follow the CDC's guidelines on it. And any guidelines that the county offers us through the health officer. So phase 2 envisions a more robust service that would begin to, in a limited way, allow patrons to come into the library. But again, we're gonna look for guidance on this around criteria as to when we can begin to provide that service. There's, as I mentioned, there's a couple stages within phase 1 to prepare us for this change as well. Once we get through phase 2 and we start to develop that out and that continues to evolve, we'll look again to that criteria, because phase 3 essentially envisions a greater degree of normalcy. And it appears to us that we're always going to have added safeguards even when we get to that. So it's not going to simply be a return to the way the world was prior to March 15th. But it's the closest this process that we can envision that will return us to normalcy. And then the other thing I'll close with saying is, because it's a dynamic situation, we also envision this as, it looks linear, but we really do believe that there's a good chance that we will have to move back and forth along this spectrum of service, depending on how things evolve. And that's the presentation that I have to offer you, and I'm happy to take any questions. So thank you.
All right. Are there any questions on the presentation? Is there any public comment on the presentation?
Chair Goldstein, there's no public comment on the presentation at this time.
What I would like is for the board to approve our fiscal year 2021 work plan and allow the staff to delay the implementation of strategic planning for another year.
Okay. So any board member discussion on this?
I just want to recognize how everyone is changing and flexing these remarkable times, and everyone's definitely learning on the go. And I want to commend Eric and Susan and all the staff at the library who started very early, it sounds like, very early to work on this. I think it sounds like a sound plan and being very responsive. And I thank you for your work, and I look forward to us being in constant touch and really working on how we can expand services back to the degree we can safely. I just want to have my appreciation and my support for this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Friend. Is there any other board member comments? I think I'd also like to reiterate those points Tina made. In addition, I'm really encouraged that we're going to be able to get to the point where we can distribute books. I understand the challenges with loaning something like a book where it's going in and out of households is obviously not an easy thing to do, but I'm really encouraged by the progress we're making to being able to get back to some way in which people can check out our product, frankly. So encourage you to keep going on that, and thank everybody for their hard work. So if there's no further discussion, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the work plan.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Okay, so that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is our 2021 library budget. We have 5 items in our staff recommendation, which I won't read at this time. We'll get to it when we get to it. Susan, do we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, and I am basically going to go over the board report. In March, Shelf 5 from the City of Santa Cruz brought to you a forecast, and the library brought to you some preliminary budget assumptions. I think all of those things are off the table as a result of the pandemic and shelter in place. So the thing I want to start out with is we have looked at our reserves, and they're higher than I anticipated. We have 2.9 million in budgeted reserves. About a year and a half ago, this board chose to raise the reserve amount from 15 to 20%. And I think there was great wisdom in that, and it will help us through some very difficult times. In addition to the 2.9 million in budgeted reserves, we have about $1.8 million in projected unrestricted fund balances. We have been working with the county and the city on projecting revenue over the next year, and I want everyone to acknowledge how difficult that is during these times. The sales tax revenue is recommending, the sales tax revenue is projected to decrease by 3.8% in this fiscal year and 18.8% in FY 2021. I think if you talk to Nicole, who has really looked into, Nicole Colburn, who's really looked into the revenue projections, many folks with expertise in this area think those revenue projections may be optimistic, but they are what we have at this time. I just want to say that sales tax represents over half of the library's budget. So reductions in sales tax will have a profound effect on our ability to operate. I also just want to say that those revenue projections are based upon a concept that there'll be an easing or ending of the shelter in place mandates within the first quarter of 2021. So that really is by October 1st, this starts to go away. And I think as we get more and more information about this crisis, that seems somewhat unlikely. So in order to drop the, manage the 3.8% loss in sales tax for this year, we have instituted a hiring freeze. We have let go of 62 of our temporary or on-call employees. And when I say let go, that's not probably the correct term. Our temporary and on-call employees are unbenefited part-time employees that are called to work on sort of a monthly, weekly basis. They really, with 62 people in an organization that's trying to run a 7-day-a-week operation, they are really essential to the public service efforts of the library. They're really essential to circulation, and they're really essential to the hours that we're able to offer the public. So the loss of those 62 individuals has a great impact on what we can do in the future. We're reducing or deferring spending. I think the easiest ones are contracts like cleaning contracts and security contracts. We're also suggesting and recommending that you use $1 million of unrestricted fund balance for us to get through this year. What we do next year in part is based upon the assumptions that the board has. The library wants to preserve excellent services. I was told the day I arrived that we are going to maintain 10 library sites. So I think our budget approach is assuming that. We believe that there is a shorter term temporary nature to this crisis. It may be 2 years, it may be 3 years, but in the end, we assume that we will go back to public services at 10 library sites that will be open to the public in ways that they are open over the past year. We promise to work with our partners and our colleagues to make sure that we're not duplicating services in our community and look at duplication potentially between our organization and others. I think we have some great opportunities to work with organizations like the city and the county's parks and recreation departments. And then we're just really committed to being open with both our staff and our friends at the library and the community members because of the interest that the public has in maintaining public libraries across Santa Cruz County. So for the next year, we're proposing a series of measures, most of which have a one-time nature to them. It doesn't do permanent long-term reductions or reorganization. We want to continue our hiring freeze. We believe we can save about $400,000. We're targeting reducing personnel expenditures by about $800,000. That would be with our regular staff. I know the union is meeting with the City of Santa Cruz representatives today to talk about a series of strategies for how that could be accomplished. We're going to reduce hours of public services available at branches or choose less expensive schedules. So for example, a 4-hour block schedule being closed 2 consecutive days a week are less expensive ways of offering services because they make staffing cheaper, not because the public necessarily wants that particular schedule. One of the things we can do is time opening and closing of branches under construction to maximize the use of staff. So can we open Capitola at the point in time in which we close the Aptos library so that the Aptos library staff could staff Capitola for the 2 years it will take for the Aptos staff branch to open? It buys us time. It doesn't create significant permanent cuts. We're proposing reducing the materials budget and our non-personnel budget. And we believe we'll probably still, on top of all of that, have to strategically use our fund balances and the reserve to the tune of about $1.5 million. That still leaves us with about $2 million in our budgeted reserve at the end of fiscal year 2021. The thing that I'm asking of you today, we have another budget consideration in June at the June meeting, but today I want you to evaluate this budget update, authorize and ratify exploration of the budget saving measures and the strategic use of fund balances, approve our budgetary principles, and direct us to develop a 2020 budget with $3.8 million in spending reductions or use of the reserve. And then to, of course, closely monitor what's happening with the shelter-in-place order and the COVID crisis. And I will stand for questions.
Are there any questions from board members?
I had a number of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. So Susan, you're projecting a $3.8 million deficit.
In FY 2021.
So, I see. What about the deficit at the end of this fiscal year? You think it's going to be the 1.2 million?
Yeah, but I believe we can save $200,000 before July 1st.
Okay.
So
And
it'll be
what's
$1 million.
So you think it's going to be $1 million deficit and you'll save 200,000? So what's the assumption for the decline in sales tax that we're using to come with the deficit at the end of this fiscal year?
Nicole has helped us with the projections on sales tax. Nicole, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So for this current year, because the library operates on a cash basis, we distribute what comes in when it comes in. We're not treating it on an accrual basis. So the drop this year actually won't be as great as what we'll experience next year. So we're really only looking at what's coming in this fourth quarter of 2019-20 as probably the biggest hit that the library sales tax will take. The drop in the current year is about $400,000 less, or 3.8% less than what we budgeted for the year. And it's about equally as less from what we estimated in January. So overall, it's a 3.8% decline from the budget, or $400,000 approximately. This year we've been benefited by the fact that we received all those one-time payments that the state didn't give us last fiscal year. So it's kind of helped prop us up in this current fiscal year with all the backlog of payments that the state has given us. Next year, I think we're going to see a greater impact to the budget.
And I also wanted to add, Carlos, is that we were planning for a structural deficit this year of between $600,000 and $700,000. This was part of our plan to add staff, acknowledging that we were going to get the MOU funds in FY 2022. We had planned for a structural deficit this fiscal year and next fiscal year in terms of staffing.
So then what's happening is that basically, because the 3.8% loss seems very low, but in effect it's artificial because of cash flow of the payments received from the state. The actual loss, of course, that we're projecting in our sales tax for cities and counties is greater than 3.8%. So am I correct? It's more of just an anomaly due to the cash flow of receiving those late payments?
That's correct, Carlos. It's just an anomaly because of how we're receiving a lot of those payments that we'll see. Those large drops will hit us next fiscal year, not this fiscal year.
Okay. And then on the hiring freeze, you project $400,000 of savings. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's just from holding positions vacant?
We were scheduled to hire for the Capitola branch, and that is now on hold.
Okay. And then I had a question about the reserves. So I know we're proposing to use $1 million of fund balance this year, I guess.
Correct.
And then another 1.5 million next year. So you could give me the totals on that, on both of those, the unrestricted fund balance and the reserves, the total amounts we have?
And we have 2.9 million in our reserve, and we have 1.8 million in our unrestricted fund balance. And that the unrestricted fund balance has gone up. We expected to have about 1 million. It's gone up a lot in the last 9 months.
Okay. The last thing I'll say is just that it seems that there's so much uncertainty about when we're going to open and how sales tax are going to perform. So it seems like we ought to, whatever we adopt in the budget in June, that we ought to revisit it in August once we've received more. By then we'll have more information about how the sales tax is really performing, and we'll also know more about where we are in the governor's 4 stages of reopening the economy, right? And we're just getting ready. What we do now is open to the 2nd stage, which is the very beginning of the lower risk workplaces. So that started, in fact, tomorrow, where businesses are going to be open for curbside pickup. And then we are going to open up to the remainder of the stage 2, which includes some childcare facilities and allows more offices to open and so forth, then that'll be later on. And then stage 3, they're projecting may not be for months, right? It may be, could be by the end of summer or could even be longer. So I think we're gonna have to revisit the budget come August just to see we have more information. Thank you, Chair.
And I would just say, Carlos, I think that would be wise. And I think we may have to revisit it throughout the year.
Okay. Any other board member questions? I have a couple. So just so I think in myself and the public, everyone's very clear. So we have $4.7 million between fund balance and the reserves. And this year we're proposing to allocate $1 million towards those reserves, which leaves us with a $3.7 million balance. Is those numbers?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any, and I should know this, but I don't remember, do we have any funds invested in either an OPEB or a PERS trust with the city of Santa Cruz? Or did that money that we used to for PERS, was that just a pay down? It wasn't for a trust, it was for paying down the UAL.
My understanding that it was a pay down, but Kira, do you know the answer to that question? I think the city put theirs in trust.
Yeah, we did both, a pay down. Now, I don't, with respect to the libraries, I don't know how the trust part of it is set up, but we have, yeah, we did do a pay down and also have a trust fund set aside as well.
Okay, well, maybe
Jamie,
that's something.
I'll look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I was just curious whether or not we have any resources there in one of those trust accounts that kind of goes into our greater overall reserves. And so then, thank you for the clarification, Nicole and Carlos, about the sales tax, because that number did look to me like a really low figure. And I realize now that this quarter that we're in really is in next fiscal year. And that's why we haven't seen the sales tax declines. I do think that those sales tax numbers look quite optimistic to me. So I'm concerned about going with that as kind of our base case. You know, in Capitola, we went a little bit worse than the HTL estimate, just because in conversations with HTL, they seem to think that the economy was going to kind of basically be fully open by summer. And I think that we're going to be dealing with health orders for quite a while to come. So I'm concerned about that estimate as just being too optimistic, because if we miss, obviously we're already proposing $1.5 million in use of reserves next year. And that makes me pretty uncomfortable. So I'd like to see an option that doesn't hit the reserves as hard with these more optimistic sales tax projections, that can give us an option to kind of be more conservative and maybe grow the budget if necessary as we move into the fiscal year. We talked about that August hearing at that date. Maybe at that point, if things are really looking better, that we could loosen some things up in the budget. That's my own personal take, but I'd like to hear from other directors as well. And I'm sorry, I just went totally off script here, and I'm not just doing questions. So I will stop at this point, and we'll go to public comment unless there's any other board member question.
I just have one. Thanks, Chair Goldstein. Thank you for putting this plan together, Susan and Eric and Nicole. And I know that right now it's so difficult to model. There's so much uncertainty. I know all of our cities in the county are grappling with that too. What projections do you pick? Do you pick these? Do you pick those? And so it's been a really huge topic of conversation. We're all, I feel, kind of groping forward in the dark. However, I'm also really aware that we don't just have a one-year issue to solve the upcoming fiscal year. We're going to have impacts in the subsequent years too. And so as we move forward, I think that this is a good set of things, but I just don't want to lose sight that we also have FY 21, 22, and possibly beyond. So I think as we develop our strategies, I guess, so here's the question part of that. So we are looking at those as well. I mean, we're just saying one fiscal year here, but we are looking beyond as well in crafting our strategies to have some conservatism.
Yes, and I apologize. It just took a lot of time to get a framework in place, but we'll show you outward data. The one thing that is an opportunity for the library system is the additional maintenance of effort funds will be available in FY22, which shouldn't be affected by sales tax and which should bring at least $1 million to the library system. So there is some offsetting revenue, but we will show you multi-year projections.
Okay. Moderator Jones, is there any public comment?
Chair Goldstein, there's no public comment at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. I'm sorry, I slipped from questions right into discussion. It was too easy to do. Is there any board members who have any comments they would like to provide? Okay. Carlos, is that, I see you're unmuted. Was that for a comment?
Oh, no, I'm getting, I had my questions answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I think I made my comments out of order earlier, that I think as we look at this, I would like to see us see something that has either a little bit more conservative approach to utilizing the reserves next year, or we go with maybe a little bit less optimistic of a sales tax projection or something, just so that we could back off if we get to a process in August where things are looking better. But I'm just a little bit nervous about going in with this kind of as our base assumption, because if it plays out, we would have used $2.5 million of reserves, before this is over, which leaves us with, I think by my math, less than half of the amount that we would started with. So that's, I think, my only comment. I see that we have 5 items for the staff recommendation, which is consider the budget update, authorize and ratify the budget savings measures that were proposed for this fiscal year, and the strategic use of fund balance, approve the principles, assumption, and timeline. And then we have the directing staff to develop the 2021 budget with the $3.8 million in spending reductions and use of the reserves, and then direct staff to closely monitor the impacts of the shelter-in-place orders. So those are the recommendations. Do we have any proposed action or motion?
Jamie, I think the only other addition to that was, I think Carlos mentioned coming back in August as well, I think.
Right, thank you.
Okay. And I think the only other thing that I would propose adding to the motion is just that we look at maybe a slightly more strict conservative approach than the one outlined here, either with a more conservative sales tax estimate at this front end that we could back off, or something that doesn't propose at the front end using the $1.5 million of reserves. That's the only change I would support. I would propose, but leave it to the board to make a motion.
I'll move the recommended actions with the addition of the item about coming back in August to make further adjustments if needed, and also to incorporate Chair Goldstein's request that you give us an alternative that's more conservative. So maybe you provide a baseline recommendation and then a alternative recommendation that's more conservative, and we can look at it at that point. So with those additions, I'd recommend make a motion to approve the recommended actions.
Mayor.
I'll second that.
Great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. And just to confirm, we have already gone to public comment, correct?
Correct, Chair Goldstein. There are no public comments at this time.
Great. So can we have a roll call vote, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein.
Aye. Okay, so that takes us to the next item on today's agenda, which is a City of Santa Cruz overhead service agreement. And I think this is the service agreement for administrative support that the City of Santa Cruz provides the libraries. Do we have a staff report, please?
Last year, we had agreed to do a more in-depth cost study to reassess the overhead charges of the city. as we got into the spring, working with the city of Santa Cruz and the COVID crisis occurring, we didn't feel like there was enough time to do that cost study. Over the last 2 years, we have said that any cost increase under 5% could just go through, and anything over that would trigger a study. So to keep it simple for this fiscal year, we're suggesting that you approve a 5% cost increase for the city of Santa Cruz overhead, and that we'll do the cost study next spring.
All right. Are there any board member questions on this? Seeing no questions, Moderator Jones, do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment at this time, Chair Goldstein.
All right, thank you. I'll bring it back to the board for debate or a motion.
I'll move the recommendation to approve the FY 2021 City of Santa Cruz Overhead Services Agreement.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Just before we vote, though, I totally recognize the reason why we haven't done a more comprehensive overhead analysis. And I think it makes sense to do this and push that out for another year. But hopefully that's something, as we get back to normal, we can put back in the hopper and get done in future years. Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, do we have a roll call, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Aye.
Jamie Goldstein.
Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. So that brings us to item D on our agreement, which is approval of a subordination agreement, related to the library leases by the county. Do we have a staff report, please?
And I just would like Nicole to talk. They're looking for the subordination agreement for the lease with Felton.
So the item before you relates to a financing package that the County Board of Supervisors recently considered and approved. The county will be issuing lease revenue bonds to finance some urgent capital needs of ours. And in order to secure the bonds, we had to identify certain county assets as part of the lease revenue financing. And so the Felton Library lease is one of the assets that we would like to use to secure the bonds. I want to note, so the subordination agreement is part of this package. And I want to note that if the library approves the subordination agreement, there will be no impact to the library day-to-day operations. It's purely a mechanism to ensure that the county can enter into the lease revenue bonds. And there should be really no impact. There will be no impact on library operations. I can answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Nicole? I guess I do have one question is as we enter in Capitola enter into a similar lease, I hope that we'll be able to craft similar language in case Capitola wants to issue lease revenue bonds around the library as well. So with that, if there's no further questions, I'll take it to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Chair Goldstein, there's no public comment at this time.
Okay. Is there any discussion or a motion?
I will move approval of the staff recommendation to approve the execution of a subrogation agreement.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Carlos.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Tina Friend,
Aye.
Carlos Palacios,
Yes.
Martin Bernal,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein.
Yes. Okay, so that motion carries unanimously. And I believe that takes us to the end of today's agenda. So our next scheduled meeting will be June 4th. It's scheduled to take place at 6 p.m. It's on Aptos Library. Obviously, that's pending the current health orders at that time. And so what I need to do now is adjourn this meeting to closed session. where the board will be reviewing the items listed on the closed session agenda.
Chair Goldstein, I'll be sharing my screen again. This adjourns the Library Joint Powers Authority Board meeting for May 7th. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Chair Goldstein, if we could just allow everyone who was joining us as an attendee to drop off the meeting. I will then issue instructions for how to have your closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, do you know how many people were logged in?
Hang on just a moment, Susan.
Okay.